You're listening to Nocturnal Nightmares. While the world sleeps peacefully, we open the door to what lies beneath. The stories that surface in silence, the fears that rise in the dark. These are not dreams, they are reminders. Stay with us. And don't close your eyes just yet. The moment Elias swung out of the truck cab, the air met him, thick and cloying, a palpable weight against his skin. His lungs hitched on that first inhalation, 30 yards distant, obscured by a phalanx of towering pines, and adrift in a sea of sodden leaves stood the cabin. Fog coiled like spectral serpents around the tree trunks, clinging low while overhead the sky bruised gray, heavy with unspoken precipitation. Solitude was the prescription, quiet the cure. No grand design guided him, merely the intent to unburden his thoughts. Perhaps spill some ink into his journal and lose himself in the hearth's glow come evening. He hadn't anticipated this undercurrent, this vibration of wrongness that would set his nerves jangling for days. He hadn't foreseen the insidious question. Was he truly alone in this wilderness? He trudged toward the structure, duffel slung over one shoulder, a small cooler clutched in his left hand. The porch steps groaned beneath his boots, their planks whispering of decay, a fragility he tried to dismiss, along with the tendrils of uncertainty snaking through him. The front door offered resistance, a stubborn scrape across the unseen floor within before yielding. His gaze swept the interior, a plain table flanked by 2 chairs, a meager kitchen counter, a sink whose faucet wept rust, and a short corridor vanishing toward a lone bedroom. The pervasive scent of damp timber and ancient dust bit at his nostrils. He deposited the cooler near the table, let the duffel slump in a corner, and paused, catching his breath. His mind oscillating between a fragile relief and a persistent unease. Settling in would soothe it, he assured himself. Methodically, he moved to the windows, testing the latches. Several felt loose, insecure. A shrug, a forceful tug to secure them. Guests weren't on the agenda, yet the illusion of security felt necessary. The cabin offered only a single defense on the front door, a cheap deadbolt. He worked it back and forth, ensuring it moved freely without jamming. Later, as the afternoon waned, Elias undertook a brief reconnaissance around the cabin's perimeter. The earth yielded beneath his boots, spongy and saturated, releasing the rank perfume of decomposition. Verdant growth pressed in from all sides, dense and thick, save for a narrow, trodden way disappearing deeper into the woods. A susurrus rustled the leaves nearby. Though nothing visible stirred, the fine hairs on his forearms prickled upright. The silence felt unnatural, profound, yet punctuated by the sporadic, sharp crack of a distant twig. Squirrels, perhaps. Birds. His gut remained tightly knotted. That inaugural night, he coaxed a modest blaze to life in the stone fireplace. Flames leaped, casting dancing shadows, their warmth a welcome balm against his chilled face. Outside, the wind gained voice, keening through infinitesimal gaps in the window frames. Supper was canned soup, consumed directly from the pot, the metal rim warm against his lips. The stiff-backed chair protested, sending aches through his spine, but he willed his muscles to slacken. He watched the firelight flicker across the rough-hewn log walls, seeking the promised tranquility. A fleeting glance caught his reflection in the dark window pane. eyes distant, strained. Then, a sound from without, soft as exhaled breath, a low murmur. He froze, breath held captive in his chest, listening intently. Seconds stretched into silence. He released the trapped air, attributing the phantom sound to the wind's trickery. Sleep relinquished him near 3 a.m., thirst driving him from the stuffy bedroom. Pushing the door open, he entered the main room, now bathed in the faint, dying glow of the fireplace embers. Just enough light to etch the ghostly outlines of table and chairs against the gloom. And then he heard it again. That susurration, indistinct and low-pitched, seeming to emanate through the cabin's rear wall. He halted, instantly alert. His eyes scanned the shadowed space, seeking motion where none existed. Silence reigned within, save for the frantic drumming of his own heart. A prickling sensation crawled across his scalp. A tremor began in his hands. He became aware of himself standing there, suspended between sleep and wakefulness, breath held hostage once more. With deliberate slowness, forcing calm upon unwilling limbs, he crept toward the back window. He peered out, straining to pierce the darkness, but saw only the reflection of his own face, stark and pale with tension. The whispering had ceased. He remained there a minute longer, his chest constricted, before retreating to the sink. He filled a glass, drank quickly, and returned to the dubious sanctuary of his bed. The unsettling possibility that his own mind was playing tricks warring with a deeper, visceral certainty of unease. Morning arrived late. Elias brewed coffee on the antiquated stove, throwing open the windows to invite the damp, chill air inside. A welcome purge of the night's stale apprehension. The day, though cool, possessed a brighter aspect. A granola bar served as breakfast before he stepped outside, compelled to inspect the cabin's surroundings. Near the back wall, pressed deep into the yielding mud, he found them. Footprints, not his own. The impressions were clear, heavy, likely made by sturdy boots. He traced their path for several yards until they vanished beneath the thick carpet of fallen leaves. A cold tension seized his arms. His head swiveled ceaselessly, scanning the silent woods. The unnerving sensation of being observed prickled his skin, though the forest offered no visible witness. He stood for a long while, staring at the impassive tree line, the question echoing louder now. Who else shared this remote patch of wilderness? The remainder of the day was consumed by labor, hauling firewood from a dilapidated shed tucked behind the cabin. The logs were sodden, quickly soaking through his gloves, and the exertion ignited a burning protest in his back and shoulders. Each sharp snap from the woods brought him up short, listening only for the sound to dissolve into profound silence. A simmering anger began to build against the relentless tension coiling within him. His throat felt constricted. He swallowed repeatedly against the tightness. A primal urge to roar into the trees, to challenge whatever lurked there, rose and fell within him. But he remained silent, opting instead to keep the cabin door bolted, even in daylight. The precaution felt absurd, yet undeniably essential. By the second night, the temperature had plummeted. He built the fire early, settling beside its warmth with a heavy blanket drawn over his knees, a flashlight resting within easy reach. Around 9, the whispering returned, faint, insidious. It seemed to seep through the very timbers of the cabin. A low, rhythmic chant carried on the air. Gooseflesh erupted across his skin. His heart commenced a heavy, frantic rhythm against his ribs. The wind, he insisted silently, an echo through the pines. Yet the sound possessed a cadence, a deliberate rise and fall that belied natural origins. Rising, he gripped the flashlight, unbolted the door, and stepped onto the porch. The night air struck his face like an icy palm. He swept the flashlight beam across the porch, the steps, the shadowed space beneath the eaves. Nothing. Then directing the light outward into the Stygian blackness between the trees, he caught it. Movement. A silhouette. Indistinct. Perhaps 6 or 7 yards away, partially concealed behind the thick bole of a pine. He snapped the flashlight beam toward it, heart leaping, but the light illuminated only rough bark. His pulse roared in his ears. His palms grew slick with cold sweat. He clamped his jaw shut, teeth threatening to chatter. Holding the flashlight steady, he scanned the area, hoping for another glimpse, another confirmation. Above, the wind rustled the high branches, but the shape, the presence, had vanished. He took a hesitant step off the porch, intending pursuit, but his legs felt unsteady, watery. He could almost feel unseen eyes fixed upon him, yet tangible proof remained elusive. Retreating inside, he secured the deadbolt and, feeling foolish yet compelled, wedged a chair beneath the doorknob, a flimsy barricade borrowed from cinematic memory. His breathing came in ragged bursts. He paced the small room, mind racing, fingers drumming an agitated tattoo on the tabletop. The chanting had faded, or perhaps his heightened senses no longer registered it, but the image of that fleeting silhouette burned behind his eyes. His hand trembled as he raised a glass of water to his lips. Eventually, he surrendered to the bed but lay rigid for hours, listening to the wind scour the cabin walls, each creak of settling wood a fresh assault on his frayed nerves. His back grew damp with anxious perspiration. The third day dawned gray and exhausted. Elias felt it in his stinging eyes. A fine drizzle commenced, tapping persistently against the roof. He resolved to explore the narrow path he'd noted earlier, hoping it might lead to a stream, a clearing, some feature to break the monotony of dense woods. Donning jacket, boots, and hat, flashlight tucked securely into his belt, he ventured out. The path proved overgrown, slick with moisture. Wet branches lashed at his face and arms as he pressed forward. After perhaps 15 minutes of struggling through the undergrowth, he emerged into a small, unexpected clearing. In its center lay a circle of stones. No ashes, no charred wood indicated a recent fire, yet the deliberate, neat arrangement of the stones radiated an immediate wrongness. The hairs on his nape stiffened. Squatting beside the circle, he examined the stones more closely. They were stained with something dark, brownish, and disturbingly crusty. Hesitantly, he touched one with a fingertip. A tacky residue clung to his skin. He snatched his hand back, wiping it fiercely on the damp grass, his stomach churning. The air here held a peculiar odor. Wet earth mingled with something else, something metallic and vaguely foul that made him grimace. As he started to rise, a sudden sharp flurry of whispers erupted directly behind him, seeming to coalesce from a dozen disembodied voices into one chilling utterance. His pulse hammered violently in his ears. He spun around, flashlight instinctively raised, but the clearing remained empty save for the silent sentinel trees. His breathing grew loud, uneven, backing away from the stone circle, eyes darting frantically, trying to watch every direction simultaneously. His mind shrieked a single command: run. He scrambled back along the path toward the cabin, stumbling over slick roots and unseen rocks, nearly falling several times. A branch snagged his jacket, tearing the fabric. He didn't care. Sanctuary, locked, bolted sanctuary, was the only imperative. He burst onto the cabin porch, breath tearing at his raw throat, and slammed the door shut behind him, fumbling with the deadbolt. His legs felt like jelly. Pressing his forehead against the cool wood of the wall, he fought to regain control of his breathing. For long moments, he simply stood there, clutching the doorframe, feeling the cold trickle of sweat down his spine. He refused to speculate on the nature of the sticky residue, the origin of the stains. His mouth was desert dry, his hands afflicted with an uncontrollable tremor. The decision was made. He would remain inside for the duration. He stoked the fire, needing its comforting presence more than its warmth, and switched on the cabin's few meager lights, banishing shadows. He paced the confines of the small space, a caged animal repeatedly drawn to the windows to peer out at the relentless drizzle drumming its monotonous rhythm on the roof. His thoughts circled obsessively. The footprints, the disembodied whispers, the silhouette glimpsed in the flashlight's glare. The memory of that fleeting movement replayed itself, each iteration tightening the knot of fear in his gut. His entire body felt like a compressed spring, poised on the verge of snapping. Late afternoon found him slumped in the armchair near the fire, succumbing briefly to an exhausted doze. He jerked violently awake to a sound that scraped against the cabin's exterior wall. Snatching the iron poker from the hearth, he scrambled to his feet, knees knocking together. The noise emanated from the rear wall, a distinct, abrasive scratching that persisted for several seconds, then abruptly stopped. He gripped the poker like a cudgel, creeping toward the bedroom window. Edging the curtain aside just enough to peer out, he scanned the dim, rain-slicked ground. Nothing. No one. Then the scratching resumed, closer this time, seemingly right beneath the window ledge. His heart slammed against his ribs with painful force, the sound echoing in his skull. He yanked the curtain fully closed, clutching the poker tighter, silently pleading for the noise to cease. After perhaps 10 agonizing seconds, silence fell once more. He stood frozen, breath held, straining his ears against the quiet. The waiting became unbearable. With a surge of desperate anger, he pounded his fist against the interior wall, his voice emerging shaky and thin. "Who's out there?" Only silence answered. That night descended into a deeper circle of dread. Around midnight, curled rigidly in bed, he strained to catch any sound above the wind, which had mercifully died down, leaving every creak and groan of the old cabin magnified tenfold. His back was slick with sweat again. A dull ache pulsed behind his eyes. Intermittently, he thought he detected the faint, insidious chanting drifting from the darkness outside. His chest felt tight, constricted. He focused on counting his breaths, trying to impose rhythm on his ragged respiration. Morning. He would back in the morning, he vowed. Clarity, peace. Those desires had evaporated, replaced by a singular desperate need for escape. Then, near 2 a.m., he heard them. Footsteps on the porch. Unmistakable. The old boards groaned underfoot in a steady, deliberate cadence, conveying the subtle shift of weight with each step. His hands clenched the blankets, his mouth instantly parched. He lay utterly still, suspended in absolute silence. The steps halted directly outside the front door. He braced for a knock, another scratch. But there was only a heavy, pregnant pause that stretched his nerves taut. Then a low voice began to hum or chant, guttural and resonant, in syllables utterly foreign to him. His scalp crawled. Beneath the blankets, his hands shook uncontrollably. The sound persisted for perhaps 30 seconds, an eternity, before the footsteps resumed, moving away, their tread fading until the porch boards fell silent once more. Sleep was now an impossibility. He sat bolt upright in bed, back pressed hard against the headboard, eyes fixed unwaveringly on the bedroom doorway. Through the remaining hours of darkness, phantom whispers and faint scrapes seemed to drift on the periphery of his hearing. His arms grew stiff, his neck rigid with tension. He simply stared at the dark rectangle of the doorway, yearning for the first hint of dawn. At first light, Elias moved with frantic speed. Clothes were hurled into the duffel, unfolded. Remnants of food were jammed into the cooler. Blanket, stray items, tossed haphazardly onto the truck's back seat. No tidying, no final check for forgotten belongings beyond a frantic pat-down for wallet and phone. One last, sweeping glance around the cabin's interior. Then he locked the door, stumbled to the truck, and wrenched the engine to life. His hands trembled so violently on the steering wheel that he had to grip it fiercely to maintain control. He navigated the muddy track away from the cabin, foot heavy on the accelerator, branches screeching against the truck's paintwork, tires occasionally losing purchase on the slick path. He didn't ease up until he hit the paved main road. Merging onto the highway, a gradual loosening began in his shoulders, his breathing evening out by slow degrees. He glanced in the rear-view mirror, watching the dense forest recede, and a wave of profound relief washed over him. Yet, his mind remained turbulent, replaying the whispers, the inexplicable footsteps, the fleeting silhouette caught in his flashlight beam. His heart still hammered at the sharp edges of these memories. With each mile put between himself and the cabin, the terror lessened, but the unease lingered. Had he imagined half of it? Conjured demons from solitude and shadow? Perhaps. But the tension, the bone-deep fear, the chilling certainty of being watched, those sensations had been undeniably real, leaving him profoundly shaken. He had sought quietude and found instead a violation of peace, a shattering of nerve. The whispers echoed still in his mind's ear. The memory of the clearing's tainted stones remained vivid and repulsive. He hoped fervently never to feel that way again. A barrage against the cabin door ripped Elias from sleep, his heart instantly a frantic drum against his ribs as lightning bleached the room in stark, momentary terror. No sane soul would challenge this tempest, much less seek entry in the ink-black heart of night. Hand hovering near the latch, wary, he could not fathom that swinging the door inward meant stepping into a vortex that would twist his grasp on trust, on the very marrow of survival. He'd sought refuge in this eyrie, this mountain hermitage, craving an escape from the city's clamorous pulse, yearning for silence. The irony resonated with another concussive thunderclap that rattled the window panes like skeletal fingers. A week he'd been here, sequestered, and this was the first true elemental fury unleashed. A relentless siege, rain hammering the roof as if determined to breach its flimsy defense. The assault on the door came again, sharper now, demanding, "Is anyone there?" A voice, thin and frayed, strained against the wind's feral howl. "Please, I need help." Hesitation seized him, fingers tightening on the gold brass knob. Fragments of cautionary tales, cinematic dread, flickered behind his eyes. Yet, the thought of abandoning someone to the storm's mercy felt like a betrayal of some fundamental human compact. Drawing a breath that felt thin in the charged air, he pulled the door open. She stood framed in the doorway, a drenched wraith shivering with profound violence. Tendrils of dark hair clung like seaweed to her pale face. Her eyes were vast pools reflecting fear, desperation. "Oh, thank heaven," she breathed, the words clicking through chattering teeth. "I was afraid no one..." Inside, Elias urged, stepping back to grant her passage. "You're soaked through." She stumbled across the threshold, a creature overwhelmed, and he quickly barred the door against the gale's renewed assault. Closer now, he saw the youth beneath the grime and exhaustion, perhaps mid-20s. Her clothing was savaged, rent and stained with mud, and a raw, angry scratch marked one cheekbone. "Thank you," she managed, arms wrapped tight around herself. "I truly didn't think anyone lived out here." Hope was dwindling. He retrieved a thick woolen blanket from the worn sofa, draping it over her shaking shoulders. "What happened? How did you find yourself lost in this?" Her fingers clenched the blanket, eyes darting, mapping the unfamiliar space as if expecting threats to materialize from the shadows. "It's complicated. I hardly know where to start." "Perhaps with a name," Elias suggested, striving for a tone of calm anchorage in the surrounding chaos. A pause then. "Lyra. My name is Lyra." "Elias," he returned. "Look, Lyra, you're safe for now. Sit down. I'll put some water on for tea. Then you can tell me what brought you here." She nodded, a flicker of gratitude warming her gaze, and sank onto the sofa cushions while Elias moved to the compact kitchenette. As the kettle began its slow hum towards boiling, his gaze kept drifting back to her. She was a study in frayed nerves, starting violently at each thunderous pronouncement from the heavens. When he presented the steaming mug, her hands enveloped it as if it were a source of fundamental warmth, a tangible anchor. "Thank you," she whispered. "You can't imagine how much this means." He settled into the armchairs opposite, affording her a measure of space. "So, Lyra, what errand deposits you in the absolute middle of nowhere on a night sculpted by storms?" She took a tentative sip, flinching slightly. "I was escaping," she admitted finally. her voice barely more substantial than the steam rising from her mug. Escaping what? Elias leaned forward, intrigued despite his caution. Lyra's eyes met his, and within their depths lay a terror so profound it sent an icy tributary flowing through his veins. Someone who means to harm me. Very dangerous. A different kind of chill settled over him, unrelated to the tempest raging beyond the walls. Are you in some kind of legal trouble? Should we try contacting the authorities? She shook her head with startling vehemence. No, please, no police. They won't help. They could be involved with him. Internal alarms began to clang, dissonant notes in the quiet cabin. This narrative felt increasingly perilous, a current threatening to pull him under. Yet abandoning her remained unthinkable. Who is pursuing you, Lyra? He asked, softening his tone. She placed the mug down on the side table, her hands trembling visibly. My ex-boyfriend. He's not the person I believed him to be. I discovered things he was involved in, deeply illegal, dark things, when I confronted him. Her voice trailed off, her fingers drifting unconsciously to the scratch marring her cheek. A sudden surge of protective anger rose in Elias. He struck you? Lyra nodded, tears filming her eyes. I broke away, but he's been relentless, hunting me. Days I've been running. I thought I'd finally shaken him, but then I saw his car, unmistakable, on the access road below. Panic took hold. I fled into the forest just as the sky broke open. His thoughts raced, assembling the grim possibilities. If her account held true, the sanctuary he offered was fragile, potentially compromised. Do you believe he knows you sought refuge here? I can't be sure, she answered, her voice quavering. I pray not. But he has a knack, an awful talent for finding me. Elias rose, crossing to the window, peering into the maelstrom. Visibility was nil, a curtain of rain and darkness obscuring everything beyond the porch steps. An unseen watcher could be feet away, and they'd remain oblivious until the moment of impact. We should be secure through the night, he stated, injecting a confidence he didn't fully possess. This storm is too severe for any effective search. Come morning, we'll reassess, find a way forward. Relief visibly smoothed the tension from Lyra's face. Thank you, Elias. Truly. Without you tonight. He offered a strained smile. Try and find some rest. The bedroom is yours. I'll stay out here, keep an ear out, just to be certain. She seemed poised to argue, but profound weariness appeared to override the impulse. He guided her to the small adjacent room, provided some dry clothes he kept spare, and then resigned himself to a long, watchful night on the sofa. Sleep remained elusive. Every groan of the cabin settling, every sigh of the wind stretched his nerves taut. Larry's narrative echoed in his mind, a looping reel he dissected, searching for coherence. One part of him yearned to accept it wholesale, to embody the role of protector for this apparent victim. Yet, a colder, more analytical current whispered inconsistencies. As the hours bled towards dawn and the storm gradually relinquished its grip, those whispers amplified. Discrepancies nagged. The scratch on her cheek seemed too cleanly scabbed for a fresh injury, and if she'd plunged desperately through rain-soaked woods, why were her sturdy boots relatively free of mud? Near first light, a soft stirring came from the bedroom. Lyra emerged, looking remarkably composed, far more so than one might expect after days as a fugitive culminating in a night of terror. "Morning," she offered, a faint smile touching her lips. "Any disturbances?" He shook his head. "Nothing. The storm has broken. We should be able to make our way to town shortly. Arrange proper assistance for you." A fleeting shadow, alarm, crossed her features before vanishing. "I'm not certain that's wise. He could be observing the roads." "Lyra," Elias began, choosing his words with deliberation, "I believe it's time you shared the unvarnished truth. Who, precisely, are you running from?" She held his gaze for a protracted moment, and he witnessed the facade dissolve. The desperate fear evaporated, replaced by an unnerving coolness, a shrewd calculation. "You possess more perception than your countenance suggests," she remarked, her voice shedding its earlier tremor. "Most men are too preoccupied with enacting heroism to engage their critical faculties." He stiffened, suddenly acutely conscious of their profound isolation. "What is the reality of this situation, Lyra?" She sighed, a gesture almost theatrical, sweeping a hand through her now drying hair. "The reality? I'm not fleeing anyone in the way you imagine. I am, however, safeguarding something quite valuable. I required a temporary haven, a place to lie low until the immediate attention subsided." His mind struggled to recalibrate. "So, the entire story you recounted last night, it was fabricated?" "Not entirely," she conceded with a dismissive shrug. "My ex-boyfriend is indeed searching for me. But believe me, Elias, he isn't the primary danger in this particular equation." Just then, the distinct sound of a vehicle engine drifted on the morning air, steadily growing louder. Lyra's head snapped towards the window. A slow, triumphant smile spreading across her face. "Ah, that would be my transport," she announced. "Thank you for the shelter, Elias. You've been unexpectedly accommodating." Before he could formulate a response, she was through the door, moving with surprising speed towards a dark, imposing SUV that had materialized at the edge of the clearing. He stood rooted in stunned immobility, watching as she climbed inside without a backward glance. The vehicle executed a swift turn and vanished down the track, leaving Elias utterly alone, engulfed in a silence now heavy with unanswered questions and the bitter taste of deceit. Standing there on the porch as the nascent sun finally pierced the retreating clouds, painting the wet landscape in fragile light, he grasped the precipice he'd unknowingly skirted. He had opened his door to the storm and the stranger it carried, offering aid without reservation, and had come perilously close to paying an unforeseen price for his reflexive trust. He would never ascertain the true nature of what Lyra concealed, nor the full identity of those she evaded. But the encounter left an indelible mark. It was a stark lesson, etched in the quiet aftermath of the tempest. Danger often wears the most convincing masks, seeking refuge not just from the elements, but within the unsuspecting kindness of others. Out here, in the vast, indifferent wilderness, the most formidable threats weren't always born of wind and rain, but walked on two legs, cloaked in desperation. That Tuesday morning, venturing into the manor felt less like an inspection and more like stepping into a pocket of forgotten time. Elias, summoned by the custodian, expected only the mundane task of assessing venerable wooden doors for a restorer's report. Hours spent probing for decay, checking the geometry of hinges, scribbling concise notes. The familiar rhythm of his profession, performed countless times before. Yet the threshold yielded not to routine, but to an oppressive stillness that clung to the corridors. A stagnant scent hung in the air, the exhalation of a place sealed away too long. The fabric of his jacket seemed to constrict across his shoulders. The floorboards groaned beneath his soles, amplifying his intrusion. He recalled wiping a bead of sweat from his brow, the weight of the silence pressing down as he advanced toward the designated wing. Mr. Thorne, the custodian, possessed a gaunt frame and an unnervingly rigid posture. He guided Elias through labyrinthine passages to a secluded corridor at the house's far reach. There stood 3 monolithic doors, hulking slabs of timber that breathed antiquity. Their surfaces were coarse, the hue of age-darkened oak, scarred by the long skeletal fingers of iron hinges succumbing to rust. Elias laid his hands upon the wood. It felt unnaturally cool, its texture a fine grain beneath his fingertips. These portals, Thorne asserted, had witnessed at least a century unfurl, perhaps considerably more. Elias's charge was stark, determine if restoration was feasible or if replacement was the only recourse. He knelt before the first door, his examination commencing. Fingers traced the lower edge, seeking the telltale signs of termites or the fissures of time. He rapped a knuckle against a panel, listening to the solidity, rewarded by a faint, hollow resonance. No catastrophic damage presented itself, merely the superficial abrasions of years. Elias recorded observations in the small notebook perpetually tucked in his pocket. Behind him, Thorne shifted his weight, a subtle semaphore of impatience or perhaps disquiet. Elise, engrossed, paid him little heed. Then, near the door's heartwood, something anomalous snagged his attention. An inscription barely discernible, etched in a slender, wavering line. So faint was the carving, it nearly eluded his eye. He leaned closer, vision narrowed, tracing the delicate contours with a fingertip. It resolved into what appeared to be a single word, rendered in an elegant, unfamiliar script. The letters were shallow, resisting immediate interpretation. Tilting his head, Elias sought advantage from the overhead fixture's weak luminescence. Thorne inquired if he'd found something. Elias merely raised a hand, silencing him. The word felt alien, a configuration of characters that sat awkwardly even in his mind. He attempted to sound it out mentally, then, compelled by an unclear impulse, murmured it aloud. The instant the syllables left his lips, a susurrus brushed his ear, intimate as an exhaled secret. The fine hairs on his arms prickled upright. He spun around, expecting intrusion, but the corridor stretched vacant save for Thorn, a sentinel figure a good 10 feet distant. A sudden tightness seized his chest, akin to plunging into icy water. He shook his head, attributing the sensation to imagination. A stray current of air navigating the ancient house. Turning back to the door, Elias froze. The engraving seemed altered. The very shape of the letters had subtly shifted, rearranged as if by an unseen hand. His eyes widened. He pressed closer, needing to verify the impossible. It was unequivocally not the word he had just uttered. A frantic pulse began to hammer against his ribs. His palms grew slick with a sudden dampness, compelling him to wipe them against the sturdy fabric of his trousers. Thorn's voice drifted down the corridor. "Everything satisfactory, Mr. Elias managed a curt nod, unwilling to voice the burgeoning madness. He needed more time, he mumbled. He glanced toward the custodian, gesturing for space, driven by an instinct he couldn't articulate. He didn't want Thorn witnessing this peculiarity. The man retreated a few paces, ostensibly preoccupied with his phone. Elias drew a ragged breath, then, with deliberate care, vocalized the new configuration of letters. The moment the sound died, the whisper returned, louder this time, seeming to ripple from one end of the hall to the other. A frisson of cold air traced the nape of his neck. He saw his own hand tremble slightly and tightened his grip on the notepad for ballast. His gaze snapped back to the door. Again, the word transmuted, flowing into yet another form, as if the wood itself possessed a volition. The throb in his ears intensified. He felt his jaw clench reflexively. Questions stormed his mind, finding no purchase, no answers. Elias had handled countless artifacts, encountered myriad eccentricities, embedded in antique craftsmanship, but nothing remotely like this. He reached out, laying his palm flat against the ancient wood. A distinct tingling arose, a low, electric hum vibrating through his skin into his arm. He snatched his hand back, startled. Thorn, distant and distracted, appeared oblivious. Elias resolved to proceed with the inspection, forcing a facade of normalcy. He moved to the second door. It mirrored the first in style, bearing the same austere ironmongery. He meticulously checked its edges, hinges, and panels, running a hand across the resilient surface. The timber felt robust, remarkably preserved. Then near the upper frame, he discerned another faint marking. He had to stretch to properly view it. These letters differed from the first door's initial script. Again, he read them aloud. Instantly, the familiar whisper materialized, rushing past him with an almost playful intimacy that tickled his ears. He recoiled, bumping sharply against a small, dust-laden console table lining the hallway. Thorn shot him a questioning glance. Elias waved it away. Tension coiled deep within him, tightening his muscles, drying his mouth. The doors were reacting undeniably to his voice. Sweat pricked his temples. He could no longer rationalize it away. Each utterance provoked a response, an unnatural acoustic phenomenon coupled with the uncanny morphing of the inscriptions. A desperate curiosity warred with a visceral knot of dread in his stomach. He reminded himself, professional assessment, not a spectral investigation. He took a long pull from his water bottle, wiping his lips with the back of his hand. He extended a finger, tracing the second door's carving with hesitant gentleness. The moment contact was made, the wood's surface beneath his fingertip reacted. A shallow groove bloomed into existence, like a fresh laceration marring skin. The comparison, unwelcome, lodged in his thoughts. He jerked his hand away, staring, reaching out again. He touched a different spot. The same violation occurred. The wood puckered, seeming to bruise under his lightest pressure. His heart pounded a frantic rhythm. His legs felt charged with nervous energy, urging him to pace. But the corridor's narrow confines restricted him to short, agitated steps back and forth as he grappled for comprehension. Turning to the custodian, Elias announced his intention to examine the third door. Thorn offered a non-committal nod, his air of detached ennui unbroken. This final portal stood at the corridor's terminus, adjacent to a large window famed with grime that choked the incoming sunlight to a feeble glimmer. It featured a substantial metal handle, stark and rectangular. Elias crouched, his flashlight beam probing the seams. He palpated the wood with deliberate care. As anticipated, he soon located another inscription nestled beside the handle. The same fine, shallow carving. A pause, a breath held. Then he read it, his voice barely more than a murmur. Immediately, the presence asserted itself. Thorn remained oblivious, but Elias perceived it clearly. A faint exhalation, or perhaps a low, resonant hum traversing the space. He risked a glance at the custodian, still engrossed in his device. Elias's forehead felt damp, yet his fingertips were strangely cold. The letters on the third door writhed into a new configuration, mirroring the behavior of the others. He reached for the handle. It felt preternaturally cool, almost glacial beneath his touch. His fingers tingled sharply. He tested it, locked fast, pressing his palm flat against the wood panel. He felt the electric buzz again, vibrating up his arm with increased intensity. He recoiled instinctively. Seconds later, his eye caught a fresh blemish on the door's surface. A thin scratch, precisely mirroring the outline of his hand. His stomach clenched. A wave of faintness washed over him. He retreated to the first door, compelled to test the phenomenon once more. The faint word was still there, altered from its original state. This time, he refrained from speaking. Reaching out with extreme caution, he touched a corner of the engraving. Instantly, the surface yielded, denting inward, leaving a small, concave impression. The wood emitted a faint creak, sharp enough that Thorn called out, "Everything all right?" Elias's voice felt thin, unsteady, but he managed a strained affirmative. He feigned scribbling notes, mimicking the act of measuring the wood's depth, trying desperately to appear occupied with the mundane. Answers were imperative. He beckoned Thorn closer. Had anyone else worked on these doors recently? Were there any historical records? Any legends? Thorn offered only a shrug, a gesture of profound ignorance. He recalled vague mentions from past inhabitants, attempts to renovate other sections of the manor, but these doors remained untouched. Some old complaints surfaced, he admitted. Whispers of peculiar noises emanating from the corridors, but nothing substantial. Never formally investigated. A lump formed in Elias's throat. He thanked the custodian, then requested solitude to concentrate on the intricate details of the doors. Thorn regarded him with a flicker of something unreadable. Curiosity? Suspicion? Before retreating toward the main entrance hall, leaving Elias alone in the charged silence. The corridor felt simultaneously vast and confining. Elias's breathing was shallow but controlled. His gaze flickered between the three silent sentinels, each bearing its mutable, cryptic sigil. He approached the second door again, the fresh scratch stark against the dark oak, undeniable proof of his interaction. A powerful urge to flee, to abandon the assessment and escape the manor's oppressive embrace, battled against an equally potent, almost reckless curiosity. He retrieved a small magnifying glass from his kit. Under magnification, the wood surrounding the carvings appeared pristine, untouched by rot or infestation. The engravings themselves were executed with an impossible fineness, a precision that seemed beyond the capability of any conventional chisel. Stepping back, steeling himself, Elias read the second door's current inscription aloud once more, his voice slow, unnaturally clear in the stillness. The whisper responded instantly, a sibilant vortex swirling around the narrow space. His heart hammered against his ribs. His breath hitched. He clenched his fist, feeling the residual tingle sharpen in his knuckles. His legs felt weak, unsteady. He braced himself against the cool plaster of the wall. He scanned the corridor. Empty, turning back, he saw the letters had shifted yet again. The carving now appearing deeper, more pronounced, as though seared into the wood like a brand. He backed away slowly until he reached the grimy window near the third door. He needed to think, to impose order on the cascade of inexplicable events. He kept Thorn peripherally in view, a distant figure in the main hall, back turned, his pulse still raced. Forcing deep, measured breaths, he listened intently. Only the sound of his own respiration, the faint, persistent buzz of the overhead light fixture. A single drop of sweat traced a path down his temple. His entire body remained taut, hyper-aware of every subtle creak and groan of the ancient structure. After several minutes adrift in bewildered speculation, Elias decided he'd reached his limit for the day. This enigma wouldn't yield its secrets under duress. He returned to the first door one last time, running his hand over the surface with the lightest possible touch. He watched, mesmerized and repulsed, as the wood rippled beneath his fingers, leaving a faint, scar-like trail in its wake. His stomach tightened into a cold knot. He had to get out. He walked down the corridor, his steps quickening as he approached Thorn. He stated, his voice carefully neutral, that he had gathered sufficient information for a preliminary report. Thorn observed him keenly. "You look pale," he remarked, his tone flat. Elias offered a dismissive lie about fatigue. As Thorn led him back toward the main entrance, Elias couldn't resist glancing back at the three doors. He felt their presence acutely, an unseen scrutiny following him. He rubbed his arms, trying to dispel the persistent electric hum beneath his skin. His fingers trembled uncontrollably. His mind replayed the unnerving sequence of events in a frantic loop. Thorn swung open the heavy front door, and Elias stepped gratefully into the mundane reality of daylight. The fresh air felt like a physical balm. He promised Thorn he would be in touch soon. Behind him, the massive door closed, the sound of the bolt sliding home echoing with a chilling finality. Walking towards his car, he fumbled with his keys, his hands shaking so violently he almost dropped them. He didn't understand the engravings, nor the mechanism behind the door's impossible reactions, but the certainty of the experience was absolute. The tingling persisted in his flesh. The whispers echoed in the chambers of his memory. He stood beside his car for a long moment, gazing at the silent, brooding edifice, wondering what entanglement he had stumbled into. Then, sliding into the driver's seat, he turned the key, the engine catching with a reassuring roar. He drove away, uncertain whether he desired to return or to purge the entire episode from his mind. Yet, he knew forgetting was impossible. He felt marked by those doors, touched by something ancient and inexplicable, and a sliver of fear lodged itself deep within him. The unsettling conviction that the doors, in their inscrutable sentience, might remember him too. "6 months now since I first crossed the threshold of this place. The allure was the yard, a sprawling, untamed patch promising seclusion. It delivered, though the grass surged waist-high against a back fence sagging like an old man's spine. Manageable, I'd thought. The estate agent, a woman whose smile never quite reached her eyes, had gestured vaguely towards a spot near the dilapidated shed. An old well, she chirped, capped off ages ago. An historical footnote, nothing more. Until 2 weeks passed, when the urge to tame the wilderness took hold, and I confronted that iron seal. I hadn't foreseen that, wrestling aside a disc of pitted metal, would invite these sweat-soaked nights. This phantom drip, drip, drip echoing from every joist and rafter. That afternoon remains etched sharp. Heavy canvas gloves, a nondescript grey shirt clinging damply. The sun pressed down, thick and hot, drawing the scent of loamy earth from the ground. My shovel bit through a tangle of invasive creepers shrouding the wellhead. Beneath the green netting, rust bloomed like some metallic disease across the lid, a thick chain threaded through a central iron loop. Heavier than it looked, that lid. It took a crowbar, wedged and levered with grunts, before it yielded with a tortured scrape of metal on stone that raised goose flesh despite the heat. Minutes strained by, pushing the immense weight aside, sweat stinging my eyes by the time the dark maw gaped open. Strange, the bricks lining the shaft glistened wetly, though the surrounding earth was parched. I leaned in, head eclipsing the opening, and recoiled from a breath of air so stale it scratched my throat raw. My flashlight, retrieved from the grass, cut a stark beam into the cylindrical descent. Near the lip, wedged tight in a fissure between two moss-slicked bricks, something caught the light. A glint, bracing one hand on the well's cool rim, I reached down. My gloved fingers nudged against something small, unyielding. Setting the flashlight aside, I probed with my other hand, working the object free. A ring. Its band was substantial, forged from some lusterless grey metal, pewter perhaps, or dull iron, hard to discern beneath the grime. Set into it was a stone, or maybe crystal, obsidian dark and lightless. It radiated a peculiar cold, a chill that seeped through the glove, colder than the metal itself. It resisted, then broke free with a sudden jolt that nearly sent me tumbling forward. The instant it rested in my palm, a disquiet washed over me, a tingling awareness at the nape of my neck. Without conscious thought, I slid it into my jeans pocket. Dropping it back seemed pointless. A strange, unwelcome curiosity had taken root. I hauled the iron lid back, nudging it into place, and spent the remainder of the afternoon hacking at defiant weeds, the ring a cold weight against my thigh. Later, showering away the day's grime, I heard it first amidst the plumbing's familiar gurgles, a rhythmic dripping subtly out of sync with the spray hitting the tiles. I twisted the chrome knob. The shower head sputtered silent, yet the sound persisted. Drip, 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 faint, elusive. I checked the bathroom sink faucet, ran a hand under the spout, dry. The sound seemed to emanate from within the walls themselves. Tapping the tiles yielded nothing. Then abruptly it faded. Old houses groan, I told myself. They settle. They whisper. That night, exhaustion pulled me towards sleep the moment my head hit the pillow. But a formless anxiety coiled in my gut. Just the day's exertion, surely. Then sleep claimed me, and the dream began. I was plummeting into the well, the rough bricks a blur rushing past, cold air tearing at my face. Far below, a shape lay dark, inert, and from that abyss, a voice rose, a subterranean rumble that resonated deep in my chest. Return it. It vibrated. I snapped awake, heart hammering against my ribs, sheets plastered to my skin with sweat. The bedroom was utterly black, and the dripping was back, louder now, impossibly close, as if originating beside the bed. My hand fumbled for the lamp switch. Light flooded the room, revealing nothing amiss. I lay back, rigid, listening, but sleep remained a distant shore. The following day became a battle for distraction. I pounded new planks into the failing fence, pruned overgrown shrubs, raked drifts of dead leaves into brittle piles. Yet, in every pause, every moment of stillness, the phantom dripping found me. A whisper of water, directionless, seeming to drift from the shed's shadow one moment, the kitchen window the next. Auditory hallucination, I reasoned. Stress. The ring, nestled in its box now, felt like a ridiculous Gothic explanation, yet the thought nagged. By late afternoon, depleted, I craved something cold. Inside, the refrigerator hummed. As I twisted the cap off a bottle of soda, a soft hiss preceded it. Drip, 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 a cadence of warning. My stomach clenched. The soda tasted flat, metallic. I drank quickly, setting the bottle down, anticipating leaks, finding none. Sleep offered no refuge that night. I sought it early, hoping rest would dispel the clinging unease. Instead, I plunged again into the well, sinking endlessly through chilling darkness. A scream trapped silent in my throat. The voice returned, amplified, echoing through the void, demanding the ring's return. My chest constricted. I woke shaking, gasping. The clock glowed 3 a.m. Throat parched, I crept towards the kitchen. Each footfall on the old floorboards amplified in the hallway's oppressive dark. Flipping the kitchen light felt like a transgression. At the sink, my hand hesitated over the faucet. Turning the handle, the immediate sensation prickled, eyes on my back. I spun, heart leaping, empty room. Goose flesh traced paths along my arms. The faucet sputtered, then flowed. I filled a glass, drank greedily, the water feeling thick, heavy. Shutting it off, the dripping commenced instantly, louder, seemingly originating from the cabinet directly beneath the sink. I flung the cabinet door open. Pipes, cleaning supplies, all dry. The drip, drip, drip pulsed for several seconds, then vanished as if it had never been. Days bled together, each shadowed by the persistent drip. It followed me relentlessly. A soft counterpoint to the television's drone in the living room. An echo in the garage as I searched for tools. A faint patter near the mailbox at the edge of the property. Never loud, never frantic, just present, steady, wrong. I tried to maintain normalcy. Work, errands, even coffee with a colleague. But every sip of liquid felt charged, tainted. I began to avoid water, rationing hand washes, wiping sweat with paper towels instead of splashing cool water on my face. My skin grew tacky, uncomfortable, yet preferable to the feeling of unseen scrutiny. The ring remained sequestered in a small wooden box on my nightstand. Forgetting it proved impossible. Each time the drawer slid open, the dark stone seemed to draw my gaze. Touching it sent that unnatural cold up my arm, sometimes accompanied by a faint, unsettling vibration. Return it. The thought, or perhaps the voice itself, would surface in my mind, slicking my palms with sweat. My thoughts skittered towards wild explanations, ancient curses, vengeful spirits. I fought back by focusing on the tangible: fence repairs, patching plaster, anything solid. One evening, steeling myself, I went back to the well. Dusk bled purple at the edges of the sky. I hoped the fading light might offer some courage. The vines had already begun their reclamation, creeping possessively over the iron lid. It resisted my pull, as heavy and obstinate as before, screeching its protest as I slid it aside. Kneeling, I aimed the flashlight's beam into the shaft. The bricks still wept their mysterious dampness. A column of frigid air pushed upwards, chilling my face. Though the evening air was still, the light pierced the blackness but revealed no bottom, no glint of water, just depth. My pulse thrummed, breath catching shallowly. I crouched there, listening. A single faint drip echoed from below. My mouth was desert dry, hands clammy around the flashlight's casing. Then I heard it. Not in my head this time, but resonating physically from the well's throat. Not words, just a low, prolonged moan that vibrated through the stone. Startled, I fumbled the flashlight. It clattered against the bricks, its beam momentarily illuminating the descent before flickering out. I scrambled backward, heart trying to batter its way free. With a desperate shove, I kicked the heavy lid back into place, scraping my knuckles raw on the concrete surround. The flashlight was lost. I didn't care. Reaching back into that darkness was unthinkable. That night became a vigil on the living room couch, every light blazing against the encroaching shadows. Nausea churned. The dripping seemed woven into the very fabric of the house, a subtle, maddening rhythm beneath the silence. Return the ring, The thought hammered at me. But how? Simply toss it back down? Seal the well again? Would that appease whatever lingered below, or provoke it further? Visions surfaced, a skeletal hand erupting from the dark to seize my wrist as I leaned over the edge. Sweat beaded on my forehead. My jaw ached from clenching. I scanned the room, half expecting spectral puddles to form on the floorboards, damp patches to bloom on the ceiling. Only dryness met my gaze. And the drip, 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 a metronome marking my fear. Sleep, when it finally came, was fragmented, punctuated by jolts back to consciousness. The well's image burned onto my retinas, the voice a fading echo. My pillow grew damp. Morning found me hollow-eyed, drained. In the kitchen, I forced myself to the sink, needing coffee. My hand trembled, reaching for the faucet. Water splashed into the basin, and the familiar prickle returned. The sense of being observed. Skin crawled. I rinsed the mug quickly, shutting off the flow almost immediately. Enough, this couldn't continue. Retrieving the ring from its box, the cold it radiated was shocking, like holding a shard of ice. Pocketing it, I walked stiffly into the yard. Beside the well, the air hung unnaturally still. Bile rose in my throat. Forcing my hands to obey, I gripped the rusty chain. The lid grated open, the sound setting my teeth on edge. I knelt, the dark opening a void at my feet. The ring felt heavy, malevolent, in my palm. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in my chest. Below, only blackness yawned. I held the ring out over the abyss, my breath hitched. Return it. The command echoed not from the depths, but from within my own skull. My hand shook violently. The ring slipped, a dark speck vanishing instantly into the unseen. Silence. For a long moment, nothing. Then, from far below, a single, resonant drip. Weakness flooded my limbs. With trembling hands, I wrestled the lid back, securing it as best I could. My whole body hummed with tension. Back inside, I didn't look back. At the kitchen sink, I stood for long minutes, letting the water run, deliberately washing my hands, waiting for the familiar dread, the feeling of unseen eyes. It was there, yes, but muted, indistinct. Turning off the faucet, I held my breath, listening. The phantom drip. It wasn't gone, but it was quieter now. Less insistent. A layer of oppressive weight seemed to have lifted. I don't know if it's truly over. Sleep comes more easily, the dreams less terrifying, more like fading memories. Occasionally, a faint dripping sound still ghosts the edges of my hearing, a subtle reminder from within the walls. The voice is silent. I find myself glancing towards the backyard often, my eyes drawn to that patch of overgrown earth near the shed. The lid remains undisturbed, but the guard I keep is constant now. The memory of that ring's glacial touch, the way water itself felt watchful, hostile. These things don't fade. Every stray drip in the house still makes me pause, listen intently. Is the well truly quiet? Or is something merely waiting, patient, down in the dark? For now, being able to stand at my own sink without feeling breath on my neck is progress. For now, it has to be enough. A digital shriek tore through the apartment's cocoon of silence, jolting me upright. 3 o'clock in the morning. The screen glowed with anonymous digits. My thumb, poised to extinguish the intrusion, hesitated. A prickle of unease deep in my gut compelled me to accept. Yes. The word was tentative, barely a breath. The response slithered through the receiver, an icy tendril tracing my vertebrae. "I see you, Elara," it whispered, intimate and cold. "And I'm coming." In that instant, ignorant of the chasm opening beneath me, I heard the first note of a nightmare symphony, destined to unravel my world and reforge my existence. My name is Elara Vance. Until that violation of the night, my life had been a carefully curated sequence of unremarkable moments. 28, a visual artist carving out a niche in the city's hum, dwelling solo in a compact apartment that felt like an extension of myself. Rituals governed my days. The quiet focus of design work, the familiar cadence of friendships, the predictable rhythm of urban living. Safety was the invisible architecture of my world. That call, however, reduced it to rubble in seconds. Initially, logic scrabbled for purchase. A misdial, surely. Or perhaps bored teenagers wielding anonymity like a weapon. Yet, marooned in the oppressive dark, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, the conviction solidified. This was no prank. This carried the weight of genuine menace. I rose, a puppet pulled by unseen strings, checking the deadbolt, the window latches, drawing the heavy velvet curtains closed as if fabric could repel ill intent. Peering through a sliver into the street lamp-washed emptiness below, I scanned for a watcher, a silhouette against the pre-dawn gloom. Nothing. Only the city breathing its slow, indifferent sighs. Sleep became an impossibility. Each settling groan of the old building, each distant wail of a siren, was a fresh assault on my frayed nerves. When the alarm clock chirped its offensively cheerful summons at 7, exhaustion warred with a profound relief at the sight of sunlight striping the floor. Daylight, the great sterilizer of nocturnal fears. How absurd, I berated myself while the coffee brewed, to be undone by a phantom voice. By the time I stepped out, bathed in the morning's impartial glow, I had almost managed to relegate the incident to the realm of bad dreams. Then, the phone vibrated again. Unknown. A tremor ran through my hand as I brought it to my ear. "Good morning, Elara." The same glacial whisper returned. "That shade of emerald suits you." I froze mid-stride, my gaze darting frantically across the bustling pavement. Pedestrians flowed around me, oblivious. How? Where was the vantage point? "Who are you?" I demanded, struggling to anchor my voice. "What is it you want?" A low, resonant chuckle answered, devoid of warmth. "Patience, my dear. All will be revealed. For now, simply understand that I am watching. Always." The connection severed, leaving a dial tone buzzing like a malevolent insect. Rooted to the spot, adrift in the human current, a profound sense of isolation washed over me. Exposed. Known. This unseen entity knew my name, my attire, my home. Nausea churned within me. Canceling my workday via a shaky text, I made directly for the precinct. The officer behind the desk listened with practiced patience, his sympathy a thin veneer over procedural detachment. Without overt threats documented, without tangible proof, his hands were tied. "Block the number," he advised. "Report anything further." Standard protocol for specters. Blocking was futile. The calls persisted over the ensuing days, blooming from a constantly shifting garden of unknown numbers. Sometimes, only ragged breathing filled the line. Other times, the whispers returned, sharper, more specific. "You look exhausted, Elara. Not sleeping well." "That fancy new bolt on your door? A mere suggestion." "Your mother sends her regards. She worries about you." That last barb struck deep, finding a raw, unhealed wound. My mother had been gone 2 years. How could this tormentor possess such intimate knowledge? How long had this invisible surveillance been underway? I became a creature of pure reflex, shrinking from sudden noises, endlessly verifying locks that felt increasingly porous. My friendships frayed under the strain. How could I articulate this invisible siege, this constant gnawing dread that had become my shadow? A week after the initial intrusion, a small parcel arrived. No return address, my name starkly typed. My fingers fumbled with the wrapping, revealing a single, perfect crimson rose nestled beside a note. "Soon, my treasure. Soon." It was the break-in point. The carefully constructed dam of my composure shattered. Throwing essentials into a bag, I fled, landing on the doorstep of Chloe, my closest friend. The story spilled out between ragged breaths and convulsive sobs, a torrent of fear finally unleashed. Chloe, her face paling with horror, reacted with fierce loyalty. Armed with the sinister package, she insisted we return to the police. This time, faced with physical evidence, they escalated their response, dusting for prints, promising increased vigilance in my vicinity. For several days, an unnerving silence descended. No calls, no whispers. A fragile tendency toward hope began to germinate. Chloe, determined to coax me from my self-imposed confinement, insisted on dinner out. "You can't let this person cage you," she argued. We were walking back towards her car afterwards, the night air cool against my skin, when my phone pulsed. Unknown, with trembling digits, I answered, activating the speakerphone. "Did you enjoy the risotto, Elara?" The voice was smooth, conversational, terrifyingly informed. The saffron gave it a lovely color, almost golden. Chloe's breath hitched. We spun around, scanning the crowded street, the faces blurring into a sea of potential threats. Any one of them. "Listen, you depraved waste of air," Chloe spat, snatching the phone. "Leave Elara alone, or I swear." "Ah, Chloe," the voice interrupted, silkily cutting her off. "How good of you to join the conversation. But this is private, between Elara and myself. Stay out of it." The line clicked dead. We clung to each other on the pavement, the anonymity of the crowd suddenly feeling like a spotlight. We almost sprinted to Chloe's car, compulsively checking the back seat before tumbling inside, slamming the locks. Later, huddled in the sanctuary of her guest room, we dissected the possibilities. An old flame. None existed with this level of venom. A slighted client? How could they know about my mother, about tonight's meal? The questions circled endlessly, offering no answers. The following morning, Chloe ventured out for coffee. Her absence stretched, anxiety tightening its cold fist around my chest. Just as I reached for my phone to call her, I heard a key turn in the front door lock. Relief washed through me, potent and swift. "Chloe," I called out, stepping towards the living room. "You are not going to believe this theory I just cooked up." I rounded the doorway and froze. It wasn't Chloe. Standing there, a grotesque parody of a smile twisting his features, was a man whose face sent a jolt of sickening recognition through me. Julian, Chloe's brother. I'd encountered him sporadically over the years. Always slightly off-kilter, socially awkward, but dismissed as harmless. Seeing him now, illuminated by this horrifying context, I saw the profound error in that judgment. "Hello, Elara," he murmured, and the voice, that intimate, chilling whisper from the phone, clicked perfectly into place. It was him. It had always been him. "Didn't expect me, did you?" Instinct screamed retreat. I backed away slowly, my thoughts a frantic scramble. Chloe. Where was Chloe? What had he done? Why? The word tore from my throat, raw and ragged. "Why are you doing this?" His smile stretched wider, a manic light flickering in his eyes. "Because you belong to me, Elara. You always have. You simply hadn't realized it yet." He advanced. I turned and fled, slamming the guest room door, fumbling with the lock. His footsteps echoed in the hallway, slow, deliberate, predatory. "You can't hide, Elara," he crooned, the sing-song tone making my skin crawl. "I know this place intimately. I have a key, remember? It's only a matter of time." My hands scrabbled desperately for my phone. Gone. Left in the living room, the doorknob rattled violently. I scanned the room, eyes latching onto the heavy ceramic base of the bedside lamp. Just then, the front door creaked open again. "Elara, Julian, what is going on?" Chloe's voice. "Alive." A surge of desperate hope flooded me. "Chloe," I screamed. "Call the police. It's your brother." "What's—" My plea was brutally cut short by the unmistakable sounds of a struggle, a sickening impact. Then, silence. A beat of terrifying stillness. Then Julian's voice, muffled by the door. "Chloe's just resting her eyes." Now? Where were we? The lock clicked open. The door swung inward. In that fractured moment, primal survival eclipsed conscious thought. I hefted the lamp, swinging with every ounce of adrenaline-fueled strength as Julian stepped across the threshold. The connection resonated. A dull, wet crunch. He crumpled. I didn't pause. I vaulted over Chloe's still form in the hallway, burst out the front door, and screamed into the morning air, screamed until my lungs burned. Faces appeared in windows, doors opened. Someone was dialing 911. It was finished. The hours that followed dissolved into a disorienting montage of flashing lights, uniformed officers, paramedics, and the sterile quiet of a hospital. Chloe was concussed, but would recover. Julian was in custody. The story emerged. A years-long fixation, meticulously hidden, nurtured in secret. Chloe, devastated, had never suspected the depths of her own brother's darkness. In the ensuing days and weeks, I navigated the wreckage. Fur remained a phantom limb, twitching at shadows, recoiling from unexpected calls, but slowly, anchored by therapy, by the unwavering presence of Chloe and other friends who formed a protective circle around me, I began to piece myself back together. I discovered a resilience I hadn't known I possessed. I had stared into the abyss of my deepest fear and hadn't blinked. Now, months removed, I traced the scars, not with pain, but with a certain quiet awe. The ordeal, harrowing as it was, etched invaluable truths onto my soul, about trusting the quiet alarm bells of intuition, about the fierce strength found in vulnerability, about listening when that inner voice whispers that something is profoundly wrong. The phone rings sometimes and I answer without the old reflexive clench of fear. It's a friend, their voice familiar and warm. We talk, we laugh, and hanging up, the distance I've traveled feels immense. The nightmare receded, leaving behind not just trauma, but wisdom. I am a survivor, stronger, sharper. Whatever currents life steers my way next, I know I possess the capacity to navigate them. Because nothing can replicate the terror of being hunted in one's own life. The feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. I met that terror head on. And I prevailed. That victory resonates still. A quiet, unshakable hum beneath the surface of my reclaimed life. Silence. The deep lunged hush of the deserted office tower fractured. A brittle percussion of shattering glass echoing upwards, jolting Elias from the hypnotic rhythm of his cleaning. The mundane dissolved. His pulse leaped, a frantic bird against his ribs. The chilling certainty bloomed that solitude was no longer his companion. An ordinary night shift twisted abruptly into a predatory dance, where intimacy with the building's steel and glass anatomy might be his sole shield against encroaching disaster. Elias. For half a decade, he traced the nocturnal contours of Apex Point, custodian to its 30 stories of slumbering commerce. Not a vocation alight with prestige, yet it met life's modest demands, offering quietude for the whispered narratives of his audiobooks. He possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of this vertical labyrinth, from the penthouse suites crowning its summit to the tangled warrens of the basement storage. An arcane expertise, he thought, until this moment revealed its potential as a lifeline. Just beyond the cusp of midnight, the sound had pierced the ambient hum. He was navigating the 15th floor, guiding his vacuum through the shadowed canyons of cubicles. Initially, dismissal. The tower groaned constantly, settling its vast frame like an old galleon. But then came voices, low, insistent, drifting from the direction of the elevator bank. Instantly, the vacuum died, its drone replaced by the hammering in his own chest. No late-working executive this, no forgetful soul, returning for misplaced keys. These were trespassers. Their murmurs suggested a trio at least. Elias melted behind a partition, straining to decipher their clandestine exchange. Words swam, indistinct, yet fragments surfaced. server room, and orless narrow window. His thoughts ignited. Apex Corp's digital heart resided on the 20th floor, a vault safeguarding sensitive data. Whatever their objective, malignancy clung to it. Action was imperative, yet what recourse had he? A janitor, not a sentinel. His hand, betraying him with the tremor, sought his mobile, a lifeline to the outside world, to authority. But as the device emerged, a familiar dread surfaced. No signal. The building's dense core frequently strangled transmissions, trapping him within this concrete oubliette. The voices intensified, drawing nearer. Immobility meant discovery. Silent as a phantom, he flowed towards the stairwell access. Just as his fingers brushed the cool metal of the door handle, the elevator chimed its arrival on his floor. He slipped through the doorway, into the concrete gullet of the stairs, his breath escaping in ragged bursts. A telephone, sanctuary. The ground floor security station possessed a landline. Reach it unseen. That was the imperative. Downwards he descended, each footfall measured, striving for silence on the worn steps. 2 flights traversed, then the sickening click of the door, opening far above. A cold tide washed through him. "You! Hold it right there!" The command, rough-edged and hostile, shattered the stairwell's quiet. Hesitation was a luxury unaffordable. He fled, consuming stairs in 2s and 3s. The keys clipped to his belt, jangling a frantic alarm. Behind, the heavy thud of pursuit pounded in grim counterpoint. He erupted onto the 10th floor, a desperate sprint down the deserted corridor. They were closing, their breathing audible now. A conference room beckoned. He veered inside, plunging beneath the polished expanse of the central table, pulling the darkness around him like a shroud. He held his breath, a statue carved from fear, as their footsteps entered the room. "Lost him," one voice snarled, laced with frustration. "Fan out," commanded another. "Can't be far." He watched their boots traverse the carpet, a disembodied patrol. One pair halted mere inches from his refuge. He squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for discovery, but then, a shout from the hallway. "Think I saw him head this way." The boots pivoted, retreated, the sounds receding as they rushed out. Moments stretched, taut and breathless, before Elias dared to emerge from his sanctuary. Lingering was unthinkable. Their ruse wouldn't hold. They would double back. He needed an advantage, a different path. Then recollection sparked. The old service elevator, seldom employed, concealed behind a maintenance panel designed to mimic the surrounding wall. If he could gain that portal, the ground floor might be attainable, undetected. He crept from the conference room, every sense hyper-alert. Above, the intruder's frustrated tones echoed down the stairwell shaft. Swiftly, stealthily, he navigated the corridor towards the far end where the innocuous panel waited, easily overlooked by the uninitiated. As his hand reached it, the stairwell door crashed open again. "Sweep this level. He's got to be here," the order barked. His fingers trembled, fumbling with the ring of keys, seeking the specific cut for the maintenance access. Footsteps pounded closer, louder, a drumbeat signaling imminent capture. Click. The key found its home, turned, the lock yielded just as a triumphant yell pierced the air behind him. There he is. He wrenched the panel open, flung himself into the dusty void beyond, slamming it shut. No lock secured this side. He jammed his mop handle diagonally against the doorframe, a flimsy barricade buying precious seconds. The service elevator stood before him, its metal doors agape as if in welcome. He leaped inside, jabbing frantically at the G button as the doors slid closed. He saw the maintenance panel shudder violently under an impact from the other side. The descent commenced, agonizingly slow, the ancient mechanism groaning its protest. Muffled shouts and thuds filtered down from above. Elias prayed the elevator's usual creaks wouldn't betray his passage. Passing the 5th floor, the car lurched, shuddered, and stopped dead. His own heart seized in sympathetic paralysis. Had they cut the power? The lights flickered, threatening oblivion. Then, with another violent shudder, the elevator resumed its journey. When it finally sighed to a halt on the ground floor, Elias was coiled, ready to bolt. The doors parted with a gentle ding. He launched himself forward, directly into the unyielding chest of a uniformed police officer. Relief washed over him, a dizzying wave, as he registered the lobby teeming with law enforcement, weapons ready. "Sir, you okay?" the officer asked, his grip steadying. Elias could only nod, momentarily voiceless. Catching his breath, he heard a commotion from the main elevator bank. The intruders emerged, wrists bound in plastic cuffs, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and fury. It transpired his desperate flight had tripped numerous silent alarms woven into the building's security network. A system he'd often cursed as oversensitive, now revealed as his savior. The subsequent hours blurred into a montage of statements delivered between sips of lukewarm coffee. He learned the men were operatives in a corporate espionage scheme. Their target, the invaluable data housed floors above. Had he not been present, had his panicked run not alerted the authorities, their incursion might have remained undetected, successful. As dawn painted the city skyline with tentative strokes of light, Elias found himself perched on the steps outside Apex Point, watching the last police cruiser depart. An exhaustion deeper than mere physical fatigue settled upon him. Mr. Sterling, Apex Corp's CEO, emerged and sat beside him. "Elias," he began, his tone somber. "I lack the words to adequately express our gratitude. You averted a catastrophe tonight." Elias shifted, uncomfortable beneath the weight of praise. "I was just trying not to get caught," he murmured honestly. Sterling shook his head. "You could have hidden, waited it out. You chose to act. In doing so, you protected far more than yourself. You protected everyone whose livelihood depends on this company." He paused, regarding Elias intently. "Our head of security retires next month. After witnessing your resourcefulness under pressure tonight, I can envision no one better suited. No one I trust more implicitly with that responsibility." Elias stared, momentarily speechless. "But I sweep floors," He protested, the words feeling inadequate. A smile touched Sterling's lips. You're the man who navigated this structure like his own backyard and outmaneuvered professional thieves with nothing but sheer nerve and innate understanding. I'd venture you're considerably more than just a janitor. With the sun now cresting the horizon, bathing the city in gold, Elias felt a corresponding warmth rise within him. Pride, a burgeoning confidence, a sense of profound purpose he'd never known. He met Sterling's gaze and nodded slowly. I would be honored, sir, he replied. The night had irrevocably altered him. He had stared into the abyss of his fear and emerged transformed, discovering reserves of strength previously unimagined. As he rose, ready to embrace this unexpected trajectory, a realization struck him. The building he had meticulously cleaned for years, whose every shadow he thought he knew, still held secrets. And perhaps so did he. The next time Elias entered Apex Point, it would not be wielding a mop, but carrying the mantle of responsibility, of guardianship. The night janitor had vanished into the crucible of that terrifying night. In his place stood the new sentinel, prepared to defend the tower and its inhabitants with the same gritty resolve that had ensured his own survival. Life, he mused, charting its unpredictable courses. Sometimes the very elements perceived as limitations. A humble occupation, an intimate cartography of concrete and steel, could forge one's greatest assets. All it required was the audacity to act when the moment seized you. Gazing up at the soaring edifice of Apex Point, Elias knew he was ready, for he now understood the truth. Within each of us lies a capacity far exceeding our own estimation. Sometimes, it simply takes a descent into darkness to illuminate what we are truly made of. The security camera's crimson eye pulsed, a metronome counting down the dead hours in the lobby's hollow expanse. A familiar sight, that tireless blink, yet tonight it throbbed with a disquiet that mirrored the frantic tempo in my own chest. A wrongness permeated the air, heavy as unshed rain, laced with the faint metallic tang of fear. My tedious vigil at Evergreen Towers, this monolith of daylit glass and chrome that nighttime warped into a necropolis of echoes and deep shadow, was poised on a precipice, about to tumble into a chasm that would fracture my understanding of this place. My fellow guards, the very bedrock of reality. Elias, that's the name they call me. For 3 years, I've haunted these corridors after dark, a ghost in a uniform. Usually, the fiercest battle is against sleep's creeping tide. Not tonight. Tonight, the stillness shattered. It began with the shrill cry of the telephone, an assault on the lobby's profound silence. A jolt shot through me. Receiver to ear, expecting the drone of the supervisor or the clatter of the late-night cleaners. Security, Elias speaking. A void answered, stretched thin, then shattered by a breath. A woman's whisper, fragile as spun glass. Please help, I'm caught. Instantly, the fog of fatigue vanished. I sat bolt upright. Ma'am, Your location? Where are you? I don't know. The voice trembled, frayed at the edges. Darkness, no windows. Find me before they return. My thoughts scattered. A cruel prank? Management's twisted test? Yet the raw terror threading her whisper felt chillingly authentic. All right, I soothed, forcing calm into my own voice. Stay with me. I'll help. Anything you can tell me? Any detail? Cold, she breathed, and a hum, deep like engines. The sublevels. Of course, the building's mechanical heart pulsed down there, but entrance was restricted. And who were they? I'm coming, I promised. Keep the line open if you can. Flashlight rested from its cradle, radio clipped tight. I paused. Protocol screamed for police, for backup, but an instinct, cold and sharp, urged haste. Time felt impossibly thin. The elevator's descent was an eternity suspended between floors. When the doors finally sighed open, a blast of frigid air met me, thick with the thrumming resonance of machinery. My flashlight beam sliced through the gloom, illuminating a skeletal landscape of pipes and conduit boxes. Hello? My voice sounded small, swallowed by the vastness. Anyone here? Silence answered, profound and heavy. I pushed further into the concrete labyrinth, my footsteps lonely detonations against the walls. The deeper I plunged, the more the wrongness intensified. A dissonant chord vibrating just beneath my hearing. Then I saw it nestled in a forgotten alcove behind skeletal filing cabinets, swallowed by shadow. A door. Unseen before, unremembered, stark, unforgiving steel. No handle on this side, only the impassive stare of a numeric keypad. Pressing my ear flat against the cold metal, I held my breath. A sound seeped through. Thin, desperate weeping. Hello? I called again, my voice tight. In there. I'm security. I can help. The weeping choked off. Please. The woman's voice muffled, thick with desperation. Let me out. The keypad. 4 digits glowered. I punched in the standard access. 1, 2, 3, 4. Denied. Building anniversaries, my own birth date. Nothing. Impotent fury surged, so near. This inert slab of metal, the only barrier, ramming it seemed futile. The steel looked capable of shattering bone before yielding. Footfalls scraped behind me. I whirled, flashlight beam spearing the gloom, landing on Reese, another sentinel of the night shift. Elias, what madness brings you down here? His brow furrowed, a mask of confusion. I spilled the story in a torrent. The whispered plea, the hidden door, the weeping, concern etched deeper lines onto his face. Elias, he began, voice low, deliberate. There's no phone line to the basement. And that door, it's always been there. Access to the old sub-level shelter. Sealed decades ago. A glacial dread trickled down my spine. But I heard her, Reese, just now, crying. He offered a look steeped in weary pity. Come on, mate, upstairs. Let's get some air. I couldn't relinquish it. The sounds had been too real. As Reese turned, I caught his arm. Just help me open it, please. If it's empty, I swear I'll let it go. He sighed, a concession heavier than words, but nodded. Fine, but it's locked down tighter than a drum, since before our time. He approached the keypad, fingers dancing over the numbers with unsettling familiarity. An electronic click split the air. The lock yielded. "How did you—" I started, bewildered. "Elias, I really think—" But the door was already groaning open under my push, hinges shrieking with the agony of long disuse. My flashlight beam pierced the darkness within. Empty, utterly empty. Bare concrete weeping moisture, spectral shapes of dust-shrouded furniture. No woman, no sign of struggle. Just stale, dead air. I stood, poleaxed. Had I dreamt it all? Was my mind finally fraying under the weight of solitary nights? Then, my light snagged on the floor. The dust wasn't uniform. Footprints, clear recent impressions leading deeper into the shelter's maw. "Reese," I whispered, voice hoarse. "Look." I turned. Reese wasn't there. In his place stood another figure. Sharp angles defined by a perfectly tailored black suit I'd never seen before. Before thought could translate to action, he lifted a hand. A blinding flash erupted, swallowing sound, sight, everything. I surfaced at my desk, lobby bathed in the indifferent gold of dawn. My skull throbbed. Phantom sensations, like the ghosts of vital memories, flickered just beyond reach. Gathering my belongings, the supervisor ambled in, radiating morning cheer. "Morning, Elias. Night passed without incident?" Words formed, then dissolved. Images. A desperate call. Subterranean chill. An impossible door. Shimmered. Indistinct as heat haze. "No," I heard myself reply. The words feeling foreign on my tongue. Quiet. He nodded, incurious, and moved on. But as I walked towards the exit, my gaze drifted to the security monitor array. One screen displayed the basement feed. And there, tucked in its usual corner, stark and undeniable, was the steel door I'd never noticed until last night. Weeks bled into one another. Attempts to probe, to question, dissolved into inexplicable gaps. Lost hours that always concluded with me back at my desk. The thread of inquiry broken. My colleagues, they seemed normal, yet sometimes I'd catch a flicker in their eyes. A guarded watchfulness directed at me. Evergreen Towers is not just concrete and steel. It's a facade. Something vast and hidden coils beneath its surface, something possessing the power to excise memory, to vanish inconvenient truths, inconvenient people. I pen this now, anchoring myself to the words while the memory holds, because a chilling certainty grows. Soon, my own time here will be excised. If this finds you, do not dismiss it. Do not ignore the pleas from the dark as I almost did. There is a terror woven into the fabric of this place. Remember the crimson pulse of the camera light. Remember the door that should not open. And trust no one within these walls, especially not the face staring back from the mirror. My boot soles whispered secrets on the polished concrete, a lonely sound swallowed by the cavernous hush of argent fabrications. The factory breathed differently after dark, exhaling stale oil and dormant metal, the air humming with a peculiar stillness pregnant with unseen possibilities. My name is Silas, and for half a year, the night custodian shift had been my refuge, a quiet space to earn a wage and court the muse for my novel. But this night felt dissonant. The usual eerie calm curdled into something watchful. Little did I fathom the precipice awaiting me, that within hours, escape would be the only currency left. Argent was a sprawling beast of corridors, assembly lines silenced like slumbering giants, and echoing storage bays. My duties were simple: the rhythmic swish of the mop, the rattle of emptying bins, the solitary patrol. I punched the clock at 10, traded nods with the departing day supervisor, and commenced the familiar ritual. The first hours drifted uneventfully. Then, as the clock hand crawled past 2, a fissure appeared in the silence. Near the executive wing, a section usually sepulchral at this hour, voices bled into the corridor. Not the mundane drone of late working management, but serrated whispers, urgent and clandestine. Curiosity, that treacherous impulse, drew me closer, my mop leaning forgotten against the wall. Snippets snagged in the air. Consignment due nocturnally. Containment absolute. Unacceptable risk. Snip any loose threads clean. A glacial dread seeped into my veins. This was no talk of quarterly reports. I eased nearer, peering through the sliver of space where the heavy office door hadn't quite latched. Inside, 3 figures clustered around the luminous glow of a monitor. Thorn, the company's imperious CEO. Krell, the granite-faced head of security. And a third man, whose presence felt like a shard of ice in the room. Someone I'd glimpsed but never placed. On the screen, blueprints of Argent fabrications glowed ominously. Thorn's finger stabbed at a section. Infiltration via Sector Gamma. The night crew sees nothing. The third shadow inclined his head. Their discretion is assured. They are compensated for incuriosity, Krell replied, his voice chillingly devoid of inflection. Should anyone develop complications, Argent has contingencies. Accidents are tragically common. A betraying scrape of my shoe sole on the tile, perhaps only a breath too sharp, shattered the tableau. 3 pairs of eyes, instantly predatory, snapped towards the door, fixing upon me. Time fractured. Then Thorn's command cracked like a whip. Secure him. Flight. Pure, unadulterated instinct propelled me backward. Footsteps pounded in pursuit, swift and purposeful. But this labyrinth, this metal and concrete maze, was my domain after midnight. I plunged down service corridors known only to maintenance, ducked through skeletal storage bays stacked high with forgotten inventory, scrambled up rattling metal stairs. My lungs screamed protest, legs burning. But the terror was a relentless engine. I burst into the cavernous main assembly hall, a graveyard of dormant robotic arms and silent conveyor belts that snaked like metallic rivers. Weaving between the hulking machinery, my mind raced. Consignments, contingencies, accidents. The pieces clicked into a terrifying mosaic of illegality. of danger far exceeding petty theft. Escape? How? My phone sat uselessly in my locker, miles away. The exits would be watched. A plan coalesced, struck like lightning amidst the panic, the all-seeing eye. The security system. It recorded everything. Proof. But the security hub lay across the expanse of the factory, and the sounds of my hunters echoed closer. Shadow-stitched progress became my method. A phantom in my own workplace, exploiting my knowledge of patrol dead zones. Every clank of distant pipe, every shifting shadow sent jolts through my system. Slowly, agonizingly, I reached the security office. The tumblers yielded to the janitor's skeleton key. Inside, a constellation of monitors blinked accusingly, displaying silent feeds from across the facility. On one screen, 3 figures moved with systematic intent, ghosts hunting the trail me. Fingers trembling, I navigated the archive system, scrolling through timestamps until the incriminating minutes appeared. The hushed conference, the blueprints, the chilling dialogue. I shoved a USB drive into the port, the progress bar crawling with excruciating slowness. Just as the transfer completed, footfalls hammered the corridor outside. Too close. My eyes darted around. The ventilation grate near the ceiling. Small, but possible. I wrenched it free just as the door crashed open. Krill filled the doorway, steel glinting in his hand, his eyes flat basalt. "Game over, Silas," he rasped. "Should have kept sweeping." Instinct screamed louder than Krill's weapon. I hurled myself upward towards the vent's metallic gullet. The air split beside my ear as a shot spat from the gun. I scrambled into the duct, the sounds of gunfire and enraged shouts echoing impotently behind me as I crawled deeper into the building's bowels. How long I wormed through that suffocating darkness, scraping skin on unseen rivets. The air thick as felt, I don't know. Every sound amplified, every turn a blind guess. Then, a promise of starlight ahead. I tumbled out onto the graveled rooftop, gasping the chill night air, the city lights sprawling below like fallen constellations. Freedom seemed graspable, until the heavy clang of the roof access door slamming open behind me announced my pursuers. No retreat, no cover, no choice but the void. A chasm yawned between my building and the next, launching myself into nothingness, time stretched, suspended over the terrifying drop. Then, a bone-jarring impact as my feet hit the adjacent rooftop. No pause for relief. A desperate ballet across the urban canopy commenced, fueled by terror, leaping gaps, scrambling over obstacles, skills dredged from a reckless youth. Behind me, angry shouts and the sporadic crack of gunfire spurred me onward. Somehow, gravity relented, depositing me onto shadowed asphalt below. The rest of the night dissolved into a frantic scurry through the city's veins, back alleys and loading docks my sanctuary. Every flicker of movement a potential threat. As dawn bruised the eastern sky, I found myself before the imposing doors of the police precinct, exhausted, battered, clutching the USB drive like a holy relic. The ensuing storm was swift and blinding. Interrogations, FBI agents, glaring news reports. The data stick unlocked Not just the conspiracy I'd stumbled upon, but a vast smuggling operation woven into Argent's very foundations. Arrests followed, Thorne, Grell, executives I'd only glimpsed. The corporation imploded under the weight of its secrets. They called me courageous, a reluctant hero, the whistleblower janitor. Yet, even as the dust settled, the hunt echoed in my quiet moments. The paranoia that had been my shield that night lingered, morphing shadows into threats, casual glances into surveillance. I took the offered recompense and vanished, seeking anonymity elsewhere. Eventually, I finished the novel, pouring the nightmare onto the page, forging fiction from fear, and found unexpected acclaim. Sometimes, in the deep quiet of the night, I still hear those phantom footfalls, feel the icy grip of being hunted. But then, I recall the crawl through darkness, the leap across the void. Survival leaves its own indelible mark, not scars, but a core of hardened resolve, forged in the crucible of that night shift at Argent Fabrications. It taught me the darkness that festers behind polished facades, but it also illuminated a strength within myself I never knew existed. And that knowledge, ultimately, is worth more than any paycheck.